Well, based upon the Puppet Labs State of DevOps report, which was based on more than 20,000 technical professional responses, they really have three things in common. First, they're more agile. Teams, of course, are innovating faster and faster than ever, deploying 30 times more frequently with 200 shorter lead times. And secondly, that makes them more reliable by streaming their processes and streamlining those processes and fortifying infrastructure. High-performing teams are 60 times fewer failures these days and recover 168 times faster. And finally, they're just winning. Teams that practice DevOps typically exceed profitability and market share and even productivity goals. So let's talk about today's situation. We know we all live in a very interconnected world that's rapidly changing. And today's business really has to have multiple tools for productivity and communication and work, and there's obviously new ones popping up every day. The business wants innovation and new technologies and frequent updates to support competitiveness and rapidly changing business requirements. But at the same time, they all want all of the services that they offer to be reliable and stable. And, as we all know, change is often the nemesis of stability. Anytime you change something, you're more likely to break it. In fact, Gartner says that 80% of all incidents are due to changes. But who's expected to deliver these really reliable services? Well, the development teams, the ones that are responsible for creating those changes. So in more recent years, agile and lean methodologies have really changed the way we develop software from the early 2000s on. And ever since then, we've been tasked with delivering features faster and more frequently, while operations has to and IT support have to maintain infrastructure stability and availability. And customers want both, and really that's where the conflict lies. So really to achieve what we need to do here, we got to change the way we handle change. So IT organizations are tasked with balancing business expectations while keeping everything running. And even within the IT organization, IT teams face several challenges of their own. There's a continuing pressure to improve relevance of services to the business. IT has to balance the rate of change with stability to ensure that they're providing business value always. We find that scattered data or maybe lack of information at all levels limits incident and problem understanding. Deployment failures have a really high risk of downtime. And all too often, just a lack of communication is to blame, where changes are made that IT doesn't even know about, or IT support doesn't know about, rather. And then, of course, duplication of work and redundancies and knowledge gaps and handoff all result in higher IT and business cost. And the feedback from support often represents customers' interest really well, but the feedback doesn't always get communicated to and from development and product owners and product managers. So ultimately, what we find is that collaboration is really the key to business success. IT support teams are responsible for customer interactions, and their success really depends on the stability and quality of services. It's really often the case that deployment and support teams really have different goals and different methodologies and work in different management systems. And so over time, they become siloed because of a lack of collaboration, which is what creates the problems through miscommunication and lack of shared knowledge. So how do we begin to break down those silos and improve collaboration and drive higher business value? Well, IT support and development teams have to work together, and with all the other IT functions, including development, operations, and QA and support and testing, everybody. And ultimately, the DevOps movement was a response by development groups to this very conflict, and it aims to bring all these teams together. So IT support, from that perspective, needs to understand and adopt these agile and lean and Kanban principles, so they can continue to support both IT and business services. So what is DevOps ultimately? Well, let's dig in a little bit and find out. DevOps advocates a collaborative working relationship between development and IT operations, where historically those things have been separated. Development refers to teams that develop and maintain software products and services. So today I'll focus on internal developers maintaining systems and tools that employees use to be productive, like purchasing systems and CRM systems and that kind of thing. Operations, on the other hand, refers to teams that deliver and manage and support products and services. And so from that perspective today, we'll be looking mostly at IT teams supporting internal systems that those employees use. And companies like Netflix and Amazon and Google today are doing this. They're applying DevOps practices and principles to release faster and maintain a high quality of services. And as a matter of fact, Netflix, I think, does like 100 or more releases a day, which is just crazy from an old school perspective. So Patrick Dubois, the creator of the term DevOps, in the blog that he wrote, stated that DevOps is not about technology. DevOps is about a business problem. I think that's a confusion that we all have, that there's some technological answer to this, and ultimately it's a business problem, getting teams to talk together. And really the best way to understand DevOps is distilling it into three popularized principles that came from the Phoenix project that Dick mentioned earlier. The first way, systems thinking. The second way, feedback loops. And the third way, continual experimentation and learning. So in that first way, it's systems thinking. When you cultivate a collaborative culture between development and support teams, you end up shortening the feedback loop necessary to drive business agility. So the functions of a collaborative culture can really be explained by those three ways, and this first way is again around this systems thinking. So a quote from Gene Kim here from the Phoenix Project. The first way emphasizes the performance of the entire system as opposed to the performance of a specific silo of work or department. DevOps transcends departments and showcases the overall value to the customer. So development teams build and then ship to operations teams, fortifying the customer value. And that first way is all about shifting our thinking to the entire system from the customer's perspective, rather than the singular goals of one team or one department in that process. So some examples of ways to apply this systems thinking way to IT support is never passing down a known defect downstream, or not allowing some local optimization that you do to create global degradation, or just always seeking to increase flow between teams and folks to open up those barriers as much as possible. Now, the second way is around feedback loops. So Gene Kim's quote here, the goal of almost any process improvement initiative is to shorten and amplify feedback loops so necessary corrections can be continually made. So by improving the feedback between development and operations and support and the customers, all of the teams can understand their impact to the overall goal. And then, of course, clarity and collaboration between teams ends up breaking down barriers and improving productivity and reducing conflict and things like that. So when teams work together from the same feedback loop, communication breakdowns just become a thing of the past. It's just not something that can even happen. The third way is around continual experimentation and learning. So again, a quote from Gene Kim here, creating a culture that fosters two things: continual experimentation, which requires taking risks and learning from successes and failure, and understanding that repetition and practice is the prerequisite to mastery. So this could involve things like allocating time for experiments, or creating rituals that reward your team for some risk-taking behavior or some success that they had or something like that. So how do we put those DevOps principles into practice for IT support? Well, fortunately, there's a framework called CALMS, which was a term coined back in 2010, which includes a focus on culture and automation and lean and measurement and sharing. So let's take that CALMS model and apply it to IT support, our topic here today. So the C in CALMS is for culture. It's all about daily or weekly rituals that influence how a team works and how they may work with others. So there's a need for a shift from silos to constant communication. So DevOps is all about agility and speed. And some of those rituals that you can apply to help your team to work towards those things are things like daily stand-ups, even in the IT support world, or hack days, or chat rooms, or even Scrum and Sprint and retrospective planning and things like that. The Kanban framework IM and chat solutions that are used to encourage collaboration between teams and individuals. And then focusing on results, not just activities. So don't obsess on the number of changes, but really what's important is the result of those changes. So measure everything and determine improvement based on those measurements rather than some sort of quantitative volume. And understanding behavior. So ultimately, culture is really a result of habits. So you need to understand how your teams work together so that you know what you can improve on. So the A in comms is for automation, and automation works when it supports the people and processes that are already in place. You can't really automate something you can't do manually. So you end up going from trapped knowledge to shared knowledge. So, for example, known errors need to be tracked at the time of deployment and communicated clearly to support. Support, on the other hand, should be linking knowledge base articles back to incidents and problems and maybe even deployment tickets so that everyone understands what's causing all the issues. And there needs to be a shift from orphan tickets to link tickets. Everything should be linked. All teams should be responsible for linking tickets and documentation, including the service desk and admins and developers and operations, so everybody knows what's going on. And link incidents and problems to requests and changes and releases and that sort of thing. So there's a cross-reference through all that stuff. And don't just deploy, but support, so that the continuous integration and continuous delivery and continuous deployment are really all core to that first way of DevOps, where we're thinking about the performance of the overall system. So your team needs to be prepared to support and operate and ensure their ability to restore services. And they need to know what's being deployed and when, so that they can give the right answer to the customers when things like that happen. The ITIL forward schedule of changes construct is a good one that could be applied here. And help with testing. So automated testing is really key to a DevOps environment. And on top of that, IT support teams hold data about customer environments that really ought to be continuously fed back into that testing process. Support's on the front line, so they really are the ones that have the firsthand knowledge about all that. And keeping up with monitoring data. So support needs to know about any proactive monitoring, and ultimately they should be the ones to help provide requirements for that monitoring with events linked back to incidents and problems and changes. The L in comms is for lean. The lean approach came out of the automotive manufacturing world, actually, and focuses on things like eliminating waste to make sure that your processes are as simple as possible. So are there things that you're doing that aren't adding any value, and eliminate any duplicate work or unnecessary administration or that sort of thing? I know that that's an easy thing to happen in those siloed environments. And always striving towards improvement there. So continuous improvement in IT support is constantly iterating on your processes and services to deliver higher value services to the business. And realizing failure is normal. One principle of lean, and the third way, is understanding that if you're not failing, you're not getting stuff done. What was learned really needs to be the most important thing your team reflects on. So create a ritual of post-incident or post-mortem reports based on lessons learned that are shared across all of your teams. And this is sort of like the sprint retrospective construct from the agile software development world. And M in comms is for metrics. So the goal here is to keep track of only the metrics that matter. It's really easy to be tracking too many things and causing all that unnecessary administration. So get down to only the metrics that are really important here, like mean time to repair and whether it increases or decreases over time, or measure repetitive incidents so you know how often they occur in a period, or measure service levels in your service level agreements and operational level agreements in the context of your deployments, and look at what the impact is of deployments on achieving your goals, and what's your cost per incident. I mean, along with the total cost of support. So sometimes it's important to take this in context with downtime costs. In some cases, probably increasing support costs is going to be the better thing to do to minimize impact to the business in situations. And the S in comms is for sharing. So when it comes to sharing, you ask questions like, does the organization understand what we're doing, and do we share that understanding? And do all teams understand each other's goals and hardships and priorities? Do your teams process outputs flow into other teams' processes correctly? What knowledge does your team have that could be or is shared with others? If it's in a system, is it accessible? Do we share it? Is there an integration there? How is your team collaborating with others? Like, are there unbarred channels for communicating, or is there some management somewhere in the way that's standing in the way of different groups communicating? And are the right stakeholders being kept in the loop, whether or not they're in your immediate group? Like, do we have visibility across the organization to any stakeholders that would need to know? Do your IT groups, such as development and operations and testing and support, and even the business, share ownership of your successes and your failures and your learning? And tool sets. So do teams share tools and information? And if they're not using the same one, could those tools be integrated so that they could help share that information? So how do we define success ultimately? So success is, it's good to look at success as not effective processes, as as effective processes, not just efficient processes. It's easy to speed up a bad process, but a bad process is still a bad process. So the point here is to streamline the process and make sure it's also effective. With innovation, do we need we need visions and goals that are linked to business outcomes, and from a sharing perspective, we need categorizations and tools that enable collaboration. We have to be able to ensure that those tools work together. So getting development and IT support on the same platform is a great way to do that. From a process perspective, we need to realize that incidents and problems and changes are really just part of an IT backlog. What we decide to fix or what we decide not to fix is really based on the organization's needs. And improvement, we need to continually improve service design and transition and operations. So what are the critical factors of success in applying DevOps to IT support? It's important from a common goal perspective for all teams to understand each other's goals and to agree to a set of the same goals. And everyone needs to agree to timelines and objectives, and everyone needs to participate in setting those up front so that we've got some stake in it, so that everyone feels like they've had a say. And culture change. We all need to be using a common vocabulary and doing things in the same way, similar processes across teams, regardless of the thing the team's doing. And we should be applying learning to people and processes and automation. And we should be ensuring that metrics are being kept around goals and we set outcomes and measure against those goals. And what kind of metrics do we even need to make sure we're not storing too many? And reinforcing behaviors. So we want to reward and recognize teams as a way of reinforcing good behaviors. And there's a lot of the tools now have some gamification kind of things built into them that can be helpful with that kind of thing. So, like Dick mentioned earlier, RightStar is an Atlassian Platinum Solution Partner. Atlassian's the solution vendor who provides a DevOps-focused platform that joins both ALM, SDLC, and ITSM together with products such as Jira Software and Jira Service Desk and Confluence and Bitbucket. So I want to just take a minute to share a couple quick success stories with their solutions and how two companies used Atlassian to succeed in this IT support DevOps arena. Both of these companies brought development and support teams together using the Atlassian platform. So the first one's Puppet Labs, which has shown improvement by resolving tickets 67% faster. So Puppet Labs was a small tech startup which turned into a venture-backed company with more than 300 employees. And when that growth happened, they found themselves at a real crossroads and needed to scale to their support channels while maintaining service levels. And they're a builder of IT automation software on-premise and in the cloud. So they turned to Jira Service Desk for help. Puppet Labs IT manager, Nick Kenningham, noted that since deploying Jira Service Desk, they've had their resolved tickets increase almost 67%, which is a sign that their help desk team is able to actually get more work done. So today, all the employees at Puppet Labs are supported by Jira Service Desk. And Mr. Cunningham also noted with Service Desk and the entire Atlassian stack, they've been able to increase user adoption by staying in the same system, streamlining their maintenance process, and reducing their total costs and labor for maintaining those systems. So with Atlassian products, Puppet Labs was able to streamline its workflows and add critical efficiencies and provide help that their customers need quickly. Now, second success story here is around Skyscanner. So millions of people book trips using Skyscanner's global search engine every day, and with thousands of searches in that engine happening every second, it's no surprise that they have to take defects in their software pretty seriously. So to streamline the defect reports that come in, they needed a new type of service desk. And Michael Hall, their business tools lead, said that they're building a better software today by fixing bugs twice as fast since implementing Jira Service Desk. Today, there are 700 employees in 9 global offices are helping improve their global search engine with Jira Service Desk. He also noted that their end user customers actually get email updates from the system so they know when problems are fixed and they can understand the impact on product improvement. So again, with Atlassian, Skyscanner can now focus on individuals and interaction and no longer be limited by their tool set. So in conclusion, faster and better service is around culture and sharing and tools that enable your teams. A collaborative culture is the critical success factor there in DevOps. Aligning support and development can help your organization understand what services the business wants and really needs to be productive. So what's your takeaway from today, from our time here today? Well, first, use DevOps principles for your IT support processes. And you can start that today by applying the 3 ways or columns to your IT support. And second, emphasize teamwork and collaboration to get dev and ops under the same roof by focusing on culture, by emphasizing collaboration through training incentives and like simulation training and gamification, and through metrics by measuring everything and maybe even starting with benchmark studies, and consolidation by beginning to move disparate dev and ops support processes together. So let's take a look at what questions may have come in while we were going through our presentation today. Dick, what you got there?
Okay, well now would be a good time to submit a question. So use the Q&A box that is probably maybe up in the right-hand corner. You may have to find a little icon to hit a button and submit a question, and we'll get to it. But in the meantime, I wanted to mention that RightStar is also a SAFE consulting firm. So SAFE, in case you haven't heard of that, stands for Scaled Agile Framework. And Alan went through and he talked a lot about some DevOps training that you could potentially do to get a little bit smarter on this. So we're doing an invitation to a leading SAFE class, and it's going to be held in RightStar's headquarters, and that's going to be in the February to 13th timeframe. So that's next year. It's plenty of heads up. I know that we'll be sending out some emails about that. So I think that it'd be kind of interesting. You get to figure out how to become a certified SAFE Agilist or SA. So I think that's kind of an exciting thing. So just wanted to throw that out there if that's something you'd want to do. The other thing I wanted to just bring up, and everybody I think has probably heard of Agile 4 now, and well, let me restart. Has heard of ITIL 4 now, and what I was going to say is ITIL 4 is kind of like Agile ITIL, and there's lots of things that worked pretty well in ITIL, and there's some things that didn't work too well, and one of the things that I think needed a little bit of improvement was more adherence to some of the DevOps principles that Alan had talked about. And change management is a good example, because oftentimes you could spend a whole lot of time trying to submit a change request, and maybe you have an automatic tool to do that, like ServiceNow or Remedy or lots of different tools out there. And I think users were kind of complaining a little bit that it would take too long to do the actual change request itself than it did to do the actual change, and so then nobody would want to use the system. So I guess the question is, and Alan, I don't know if you have any comments or not on this, but if you were to use some DevOps principles, and let's say you could design a new change management system, and maybe you were going to use the Jira Service Desk tool, and I know you were a Remedy developer in a previous life. Is there anything that you can think of that would make it easier to have more of an agile change process than somebody that may have used Remedy or ServiceNow or something like that. Is it, do you know what I meant?
Yeah, well, one of the big things there is just how flexible the tool is to allow you to be to be agile. I
Right.
know from my 20 years or so, 18 years or so in the Remedy world, those things don't happen super quick, and so some of the tools like the Jira Service Desk and Jira Software and that sort of thing have much more easily configurable, quickly configurable, and even by a business administration sort of user as opposed to a programmer coder, to allow you to be more agile in the way that you handle your change process. And then, of course, one of the big things that we talked about a couple times through this would be linking things to between your software releases and your changes. So are those tied together in your system? And when incidents occur during that, are they being tied back to those changes or releases and that sort of thing?
Okay.
I don't know if that
Okay. Well, there's the question that just came in, and let me throw this one out. It says the question is, in a DevOps environment, should basic items like a project plan, requirements, and engineering plan be omitted?
Be what?
Be omitted, and not.
I don't know that they're omitted. I think they're just different. I think it's not a we finish this before we move forward. It's just those concepts are all wrapped up in an iterative cycle. So there are, every bit of that exists. It's just we don't have to finalize it and know for sure this is our test plan and this is our requirement list and it will never change before we can start on our project.
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately where the difference is. But all that stuff still needs to be done. You can't build something if you don't know what it is.
Well, exactly. It reminds me a little bit. There's this guy. His name is Mark Schwartz, and he used to be the CIO at USCIS, which is a DHS Department of Homeland Security organization, and he's moved on. So he's at AWS now. But he's written a couple of books, and one of them was A Seat at the Table, and the other was The Art of Business Value. And I think that in discussing some of the advantage of a more agile implementation methodology, he said, well, how do you know when you're going to get done? And it's the sort of thing where if you have the old waterfall approach, because you've set milestones, or now they would be called epics, but you would set, in the old days, you would set these milestones, and you would go through, and when you got all these milestones done, then you would be done, and then you might have this gigantic go live. But the contrast to that is if you're doing more of an agile project, and you may be having these stand-up scrums and so on, and his whole philosophy is, when will you be done? Well, you'll know when you get done when you get done. So he was just saying that because you're keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on every single day, and you're modifying or changing based upon the changing requirements that you may have, and you've been having these multiple go lives all the time. You might get done maybe when you run out of money, and maybe you didn't get exactly what you thought you would end up with when you started, but you'd end up with something that really worked for you and met your needs, as opposed to the traditional process where you might get something that was done that at the end of the project, and when you went to go live, you said, well, this isn't exactly, I know this is kind of what we said we wanted to do, but this isn't exactly going to work for us. And that's the big difference here. So I think it is important to have these basic items, but just understand, like a project plan, but they're going to be a work in progress then. It's going to change as you go through the project. Okay? All right. Well, Alan, another question that I have is, you talked a little bit about some of these big companies like Amazon, Netflix is another good one, and they have all these releases. And is that what's known as continuous delivery, or I guess how does that work? How do you have so many different releases? I don't think the users that are using the software, if you're using the Netflix app or the Amazon app, you wouldn't even notice that there has been a new release, would you?
Yeah, they use a lot of new technology and techniques like feature flags and that sort of thing to be able to roll out code without affecting anyone up front until they're ready and that sort of thing. But ultimately, the key is in automation, is in shortening the cycle to getting to test what you just built. and not like in the old days, sitting and coding for 6 months and then trying it and finding out it's nothing like what we wanted, but instead to be able to do that much more quickly and get immediate feedback. So a tiny problem that gets introduced by some code change gets caught as it's being made instead of 2 years from now when it brings the system to its knees because of something we didn't know or didn't count on. Really the automation around those releases is what makes that possible. There's no way to do that in a manual way. So really that's where we strive, is to be able to do that continuous integration between the pieces you're building and other pieces and any external pieces, as well as the deployment the minute you build into the group development environment where other coders are working as well, so that when you now have all of those changes quickly and immediately in the same environment, you can begin to see conflicts and synergies and things like that you miss if you aren't doing that repetitively, every day, multiple times per day.
Okay. Thank you. Another question that came in is, it says here, our application support team handles 80% support requests, and the remainder of time is spent on project work. Then it says, do you think the Scrum framework, just jumping around here, the Scrum framework could work for this mix of work? Currently, we are swarming on all requests. You understand what they're asking, Ben?
I think so. And I think I might make a distinction between Scrum Agile and Kanban Agile, or Agile Scrum, Agile Kanban here. I'm not sure in that particular situation if an iteration cycle makes sense, because you don't know what your support work. We say 80-20, but that's probably depends on the week. Probably some weeks it's 95-5 and some weeks it's 70-30 for an average of 80-20. So committing to a 2-week sprint and having something done may not be able to happen, but a Kanban board where you pull work through a board, where you maybe limit anything that could be in progress to a certain manageable number. We got 10 people on our team, so we're never going to have more than 15 things in progress, so that we can't have too many things going on at once. Then you could return to that Kanban board with those project work tickets in and around all the support work that you're doing. And even some of the support work ends up being bigger tickets that may end up on that same board. And of course you could handle even the support tickets that way, depending on volume and how you've got that organized. You'd want it to be in a clear enough fashion. You can't be looking at a Kanban board with 200 items in a column. So you'd have to break it down some way that allows people to get right to the work that they need, like a queue or something.
Right, and you would have to put in different categories, I would think, because sometimes you're going to get a request for, one particular work item, which might be or have a higher priority than something else, and so you would have to get up on that first. And sometimes there may be something that's more of an incident or a problem that's not working correctly. So depending upon the level of severity, you would want to swarm that, put that at the top of the queue. The challenge that we hear a lot about is that oftentimes these service desks are a little bit understaffed, and so it's all reactive. And what happens is even though in this particular case, I think they said they do have 20% time to actually get things done, and the rest of the time they're just fixing things. But oftentimes it's so reactive that you don't get enough time to really step back and do some more proactive types of things, some more project work, maybe take on some problems, maybe take on a knowledge management project, something like that will prevent some of these instances from recurring in the future. And I think swarming is certainly a good way to go about it. I think that's what is popular right now, but it would certainly depend upon what's happening, and then of course what can you automate as well. There's some things now that could be handled through automation that come in, and maybe they wouldn't even necessarily need to go through an agent. Maybe it could be just a text or a request that comes in through the website or through the support portal as well. Okay. All right. Well, I think that was it. Alan, do you have anything else that you can think of that you want to mention? Okay.
I don't think so.
All right. Well, I
Thanks.
appreciate Alan. Great job. And again, everybody that's out there, thanks so much for your time and attendance today. We really appreciate it. There should be another slide, and maybe there's not, which tells you how to contact us, RightStar. And there's different ways that you can see, and we'd love to talk to you if it's about safe consulting or anything from one of the number of different classes that we can handle in terms of either on the Atlassian side or either on the Agile side, then you can contact us to learn a little bit more about that. We'd certainly love to hear from you. We also do these webinars on a regular basis, so look for the next one in the new year sometime. So that's all from RightStar. Again, thanks everybody for your attendance. We hope that everybody out there has a very happy holiday and Merry Christmas. So